The TSA agent looked at Katt Williams like he was already guilty of something. Despite having first-class boarding passes and proper ID, Officer Richardson made him remove his shoes twice, empty every pocket, and submit to additional screening while other passengers walked through without question. The profiling was obvious, the humiliation intentional. But when Katt's response went viral, it exposed a system that judged people by their appearance rather than their character. Welcome to Visionary Story. Before we begin this story of prejudice, dignity, and the courage to stand up against systemic injustice, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this need to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was buzzing with its usual organized chaos on that Tuesday morning in March. Business travelers rushed between gates clutching coffee and laptops. Families herded children and luggage toward departure areas, and the constant stream of announcements about boarding calls and gate changes created a symphony of modern travel. Katt Williams approached the TSA checkpoint for Concourse B with his usual travel routine down to a science. First-class ticket to Los Angeles in his phone, ID ready in his hand, laptop and electronics easily accessible in his carry-on bag. After years of constant touring, airport security had become as automatic as brushing his teeth. But as he joined the line for the metal detectors, something felt different. It took him a moment to identify what it was. The way Officer Richardson, the TSA agent manning the ID checkpoint, was looking at him. Richardson was a white man in his 40s, with the kind of rigid posture that suggested military background and the suspicious eyes of someone who had decided that everyone was potentially dangerous until proven otherwise. He wore his TSA uniform with the pride of someone who took his authority seriously, perhaps too seriously. As Katt moved through the line, he noticed how Richardson processed other passengers. The businessman in the expensive suit ahead of him, quick glance at ID, friendly nod, waved through. The elderly white woman with the large purse, polite greeting, standard questions, efficient processing. But when Katt stepped up to the podium, Richardson's entire demeanor changed. ID and boarding pass, Richardson said curtly, without making eye contact. Katt handed over his documents, noting the immediate shift in tone. Richardson studied his driver's license for much longer than necessary, holding it up to the light as if checking for forgeries. Katt Williams, Richardson said slowly, making the name sound suspicious. What's your full name? That is my full name, Katt replied, though he was already sensing where this interaction was heading. Your legal name, Richardson pressed. What's on your birth certificate? Katt felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came when he encountered this kind of treatment, but he kept his voice level. Michael Williams. Katt is a professional name which is legal to use for travel when it matches your ID. Richardson made a show of comparing the boarding pass to the ID again, then looked up at Katt with obvious skepticism. Purpose of travel? Business, Katt replied, though he knew this question wasn't standard for domestic flights. What kind of business? I'm a comedian. I'm performing in Los Angeles this weekend. Richardson's expression suggested he found this claim dubious. A comedian. And you can afford first-class tickets. The question was inappropriate on multiple levels, and Katt could feel other passengers in line behind him beginning to pay attention to the unusually lengthy interaction. Yes, I can afford first-class tickets, Katt said, his voice still controlled but with an edge that suggested his patience was beginning to wear thin. Step to the side. Additional screening. Katt looked around at the other passengers who had passed through without any additional questions or delays. On what basis? Random additional screening, Richardson replied, though there was nothing random about it. As Katt was directed to a separate area for enhanced security measures, he noticed that several other passengers were watching the interaction with uncomfortable expressions. They could see what was happening, selective enforcement based on prejudicial assumptions, but like most people in airports, they were focused on making their own flights and staying out of trouble. The additional screening was thorough and humiliating. Richardson made Katt remove his shoes not once, but twice, claiming the metal detectors weren't reading clearly. He was required to empty every pocket completely, including removing his belt and submitting to a pat-down that was more invasive than standard protocol required. Throughout the process, Richardson maintained the pretense of following security procedures, but his actions were clearly punitive rather than protective. He made comments about Katt's appearance, questioned the legitimacy of his expensive watch and jewelry, and treated him like a potential criminal rather than a paying passenger. "What's this?" Richardson asked, holding up Katt's notebook where he kept jokes and travel notes. "It's a notebook," Katt replied, his tight with controlled anger. "What's written in it?" "Comedy material, jokes." Richardson flipped through the pages with unnecessary thoroughness, as if looking for evidence of some undefined wrongdoing. "These look like code words to me." "They're jokes," Katt repeated. "Would you like me to explain how comedy writing works?" "I need to have a supervisor review this," Richardson announced, clearly enjoying the power he was wielding. That's when Katt Williams decided he'd had enough. "Officer Richardson," Katt said, his voice carrying clearly across the security area, "I've been flying for over 20 years, and I've never been treated with this level of suspicion and disrespect. I've complied with every request you've made, submitted to searches that go beyond standard protocol, and answered questions that have nothing to do with airport security." Other passengers had stopped moving through the adjacent lines, sensing that something significant was happening. "Sir, please lower your voice," Richardson said, but his earlier confidence was beginning to waver. "I'm not raising my voice," Katt replied calmly. "I'm speaking clearly so everyone can hear what's happening here. You subjected me to additional screening not because I triggered any security concerns, but because you made assumptions about me based on my appearance." A supervisor had appeared, drawn by the attention the interaction was generating. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes, there is," Katt said, turning to address the supervisor while maintaining his composed demeanor. "Your officer has been conducting what appears to be discriminatory screening practices. I've observed the treatment of other passengers, and the level of scrutiny I've received is significantly different, despite having identical documentation and following identical procedures." The supervisor looked uncomfortable as she realized that several passengers were now recording the interaction with their phones. "Officer Richardson," she said quietly, "please step aside. I'll handle this." But Katt wasn't finished. "Actually," he said, "I think this is an educational moment for everyone here. See, this is how systemic bias works. It's not always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's just one person with a little bit of authority deciding that someone doesn't belong, that they must be suspicious, that they deserve extra scrutiny for no reason other than how they look." The security area had gone almost completely quiet, with passengers and staff alike listening to every word. "I'm Katt Williams, and I'm fortunate enough to have a platform that allows me to speak about experiences like this. But every day, people who look like me go through similar treatment in airports, stores, restaurants, and workplaces across this country. They don't have the luxury of speaking up because they can't risk making waves." The supervisor nodded apologetically. "Mr. Williams, I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience. Please proceed to your gate." "The inconvenience isn't the point," Katt replied. "The point is that this shouldn't happen to anyone, famous or not. Officer Richardson made assumptions about me that had nothing to do with security, but everything to do with bias. That's not keeping anyone safe. That's just making travel more difficult for people based on how they look." The incident was recorded by multiple passengers, and by the time Katt's flight landed in Los Angeles, the videos had begun circulating on social media. The hashtag #DignitySecurity started trending as people shared their own experiences with discriminatory treatment during travel. Within 48 hours, the videos had been viewed millions of times. Airport security experts weighed in on proper protocols. Civil rights organizations used the incident to highlight ongoing issues with profiling, and TSA headquarters announced a review of training procedures at multiple airports. Officer Richardson was quietly reassigned to non-passenger-facing duties, and the TSA implemented new guidelines emphasizing respectful treatment of all travelers, regardless of appearance or background. But the most important outcome wasn't the policy changes or the viral videos. It was the conversation that Katt's response had started about dignity, respect, and the courage to stand up against systemic injustice. "You know what I realized? It wasn't really about me. I can handle being treated unfairly. I've got resources, legal representation, a platform to tell my story. But there are thousands of people who go through worse treatment than I did and have no recourse, no voice, no way to fight back. So why did you speak up so forcefully?
Because silence in the face of injustice is complicity. And because every time someone with privilege uses their voice to defend people without it, we get a little closer to a world where everyone gets treated with dignity. 6 months later, Katt received a letter from a young black college student who had watched the airport videos. "Thank you for showing me what it looks like to respond to discrimination with dignity rather than anger," the student wrote. "I used your example when I faced similar treatment, and it made all the difference." Katt framed that letter as a reminder that sometimes the most important performances happen not on stage, but in moments when someone with power chooses to use it for justice rather than personal comfort. So now I ask you, have you ever been subjected to treatment that felt unfair, where someone in authority used their position to make you feel small or unwelcome? Or have you witnessed such treatment and wondered whether you should speak up?